Establishing connection at the start of teaching. When I first started teaching about teaching, I used to recall to people about what it felt like to learn to read. Everyone in my classes has learned to read, so I thought it would be a really good example of the learning process. But my learners didn't seem to get what I was saying. I could tell that it didn't communicate what I'd hoped to. I think they couldn't really remember learning to read because it was so long ago. But then I started talking about learning to drive a car, and when I spoke about that, people seemed excited. Previously, you learned that teaching is a two-way street. Your learners have their own set of needs, and they want to be heard. But when you're presenting information, the learners need to be in the receive mode. They need to be listening to you. One of the key principles of good teaching is that for learners to benefit from your knowledge, you have to first get their attention and ensure they are listening. Without their attention, it isn't possible for them to learn. As a teacher, a big part of your job is to make sure learners are always paying attention to you. In this lesson, you will learn how to tell an attention-grabbing story that makes your learners willingly give you their attention. In technology, we call the moment where two devices start talking to each other a handshake. If you've ever heard a modem or a fax machine make a series of bleeps, tones, and shrieks, that's the handshake. In the handshake, the devices are establishing two things. First, that the device that is receiving the message is on, and second, that both devices speak the same language. The handshake is similar to when someone asks, "Do you speak English?" before starting a conversation in English. If you were to go up to someone and start speaking a language they didn't understand, they wouldn't be able to receive your message. Gaining your learner's attention accomplishes these same two goals. First, it makes sure the learner is capable of learning, that they are on, so to speak. You've probably been in a class after a heavy lunch where everyone was falling asleep and struggling to pay attention. It doesn't really matter how entertaining a teacher is in that situation. If the learners aren't awake or are distracted by something more pressing, they are like a device that is turned off. They are not capable of receiving. The second establishes that you speak their language. So even though you are the person talking, you should always be thinking about communicating in a way that will help your learner to feel both understood and heard. That is, you should be channeling the student's own heart and not so much speaking to them as speaking for them. Whether you are teaching live or on a recording, one of the best ways to create connection is to tell a story, because our minds inherently think in stories. Create a story about a time when you faced a problem and how you overcame it. The problem should be one you can solve in your course. The problem should be a pain point for your learner as well. It's why they attended your course. This kind of attention-grabbing opening immediately makes the learners pay attention because they think you can help them solve their specific problem. They believe you empathize with them and start to trust what you say because you understand them. This relationship-building step is significant and should not be skipped. A story at the start of teaching serves as an example of a time, real or fictional, when you, or someone you know, shared the same problem as your learners, and how you solved it using the tips and information in your course. In other words, you are sharing a story of transformation. A good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just as fairy tales always begin with once upon a time, the beginning starts by relating a time and a place and a feeling. At the start of this lesson, I told a story. It started, "When I first started teaching about teaching." This story is a good example of show, not tell. It paints a picture of a feeling of frustration without overtly stating it. In the middle, you can talk about the difficulties it caused and the things you tried to fix it that didn't work. I spoke about how my learners didn't seem to get what I was saying. The end is focused on how you learned through experience that the tips you are sharing in your course help solve this problem. When I spoke about landing on the example of driving a car, I stated a solution, a better example. In this way, your story becomes a framework for their own transformation through your course. They relate to the first part of the story, the pain, and they desire the outcome, the reward. You are showing your expertise and ability to serve as a guide for them by showing you understand their pain, but also that you know a way to move beyond it. Remember that you need to test out your stories to know whether they land with your audience or not. Just because you have a story doesn't mean the learners relate to it. This is one of the many benefits of beta testing your course.